I felt like I've spent my whole life down in those mines. Just day after day in the darkness and the complaint. The whole time, I just saw it as a beginning. But when my chance came to leave the town and go out on my adventures, I wound up back in that old mine, back in the shadows. My own safety, my own ending. Don't you see, boy? The beginning, the end, they're one. At least, that's all I've got for philosophical musings. Now hand me another mug and quiet with your damn questions. I'm trying to listen to this new episode of RPG Mainframe.
Greetings, programs. Your buddy Ingrid Bernal here. Hank and Farnell back with another episode of the RPG Mainframe. That is the podcast that's made to last. This is where we chill and we do that RPG deep thinking that you have come to rely on. This is episode 59, number 59. We're going to break it down in this episode and finish up on the campaign discussion that came in the previous episode where we talked about the middle, the art of the middle of your campaign, and like not only executing it at the table, but getting some deep think done on and in your journal beforehand and giving you that sense of context toward the beginning and that sense of resolution toward the end and working that middle part. And also reveling in it if you needed to create some little loops inside there to extend your campaign or even sort of bypass some stuff to get the opposite effect, which would be to shorten it and get to the ending quicker. But that's what we talked about in that one. And as part of it, got a lot of sort of comments and questions about like, what about the beginning? What about the end? Let's talk about that. And I'm like, hell yeah. So that's what this episode is. In episode 59, we're going to be talking about the beginning of the campaign and just some like ideas on what could give you more of a sense of maybe the moments that you're dreaming of in your campaign. And that's going to be part of what I'm sort of hitting the beginning campaign angle with. Now, there are countless podcasts and videos out there about starting your campaign, right? Even some that I've made. But for this episode, I'm kind of hitting it from the angle of like those moments you dream of in your game and mining that feeling so that you aren't just going on like, you know, tips or things I'm supposed to do or, you know, this guy said this in this video, so I guess I'll start writing my bullet list. No, it's more like looking within to what you want to happen and then taking some setup steps that are going to be conducive to those types of events. Can I just say that one more time for fun? Conducive. Okay, and then in the second part, we want to talk about the ending of the campaign. Okay, so this is like maybe some ideas and creative guidance that can give the ending that gravity and that feeling of doneness, which I really think is an understated and undervalued aspect to go for in the ending of a campaign. I think so often the ending is perceived as cataclysmic, this cataclysmic sort of conflict or finale or boss fight. I think that's the most common analysis that we hear about the fun ending to a campaign. But I actually feel a little differently. I've had a lot of, you know, titanic battles with gigantic villains that do not feel like an ending. I think there's something far more nuanced to an ending that lets players move on. I think that's really the angle that I want to come at the ending part of the podcast today. Coming at this feeling of resolution, of being able to put down your character sheet and not pick it up again. Being able to move on completely without feeling like, oh man, I never got that sense of blah. I never got that feeling that I wanted. My character never, you know, reached absolution or in some cases redemption or even resolution, right? And so that's the angle that I want to come at ending your campaign on. But before we talk about either of those things, there's a little green guy in a suit over here who keeps tugging on my shirt. Apparently, he's received some kind of mail and wants to sing a song. So it looks like we're going to do some Mailbag here. Let's hear that little song, can we? I mean, you know, it's a big part of Mailbag Day, right? So, all right, kick it.
Mailbag Day, Mailbag Day. Hey, 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 it's Mailbag Day. Mailbag Day, Mailbag Day. Gonna read us a mail today. So back to you, Hank.
Okay, that was weird. I think I liked the original version better. Okay, so it's Mailbag Day, and I've got a great one here from Kale Albert. So thanks for your question. Still, even though I sort of just finished moving, still getting, I don't know, dozens of questions and sort of comments and hollers every week. And so it's always a challenge to sort of pick one out, maybe single it out to throw onto the podcast. But this one, it was not only an interesting and just nuts and boltsy question for any game master out there, but it sort of tumbled or dovetailed, as they say, into some other answers. And so I wanted to throw this one out there. So Kale Albert basically came at me and he said, as a GM, the thing that I tend to overlook the most is loot. And I think what he meant to be super specific in this case was, creating and preparing interesting treasure for your players, and then also preparing interesting and rewarding sort of moments or methods for that loot or treasure to get into the greedy little hands of those players. Okay, so Kale is saying, this is part of my game I keep freaking overlooking. Help, what should I do? How can I change some of my creative practice so that I never overlook loot and just sort of leave it, sort of drying on the line, so to speak. Like, loot is something that really drives player motivation. And so you don't want to have less loot never. You don't want to have less preparation in something that's so central to the player psychology, right? Things that players focus on is worth all your work as a game master. And so loot, even though it's somewhat silly in the overall kind of mental and emotional spectrum of a good RPG game or RPG session or set of sessions, a game, even though it's somewhat silly in the span of all those things, compared to honor and loyalty and, sacrifice, it's still so focal for a player to get cool stuff that you just don't want to be overlooking it. And so what do you do, and how can you get this more into the center of your game as a game master? And so my answer to him was short. And the best part about this exchange between us is that he kind of didn't like my answer. So my answer was, all you need when you're prepping is to mark the locations of potential loot. You don't need to prepare items. You don't need to make cool items that are specifically made for characters. Unless, that's a big part of like an Excalibur style storyline. But really all you need to do is have an X marks the spot on your mapping or in your bullets for your session and say, here's where loot can be found, whether it's on a corpse, whether it's a chest in a corner, a closet in a room, etc. And then all you do is you just let the tables do the work. Now, in the case of Index Card RPG, you have D100 loot tables that are sort of very direct to use. In the case of the DMG for 5th edition, you have a letter designated loot table set. So they are more designated by quality. And so you might need to make an additional note about which one you want to roll on. So rolling loot is far clumsier in 5e and in the DMG than I would like it to be because of this tier system. I like just instantly roll that D100. And I'm just doing that. Now, even in Index Card RPG, you'd have grades of loot tables. So you might want to note that, this closet has 2 shabby loot rolls, but this iron chest over here has 1 ancient loot roll, and so on and so forth. Now, after doing this for a while as a game master, you're not going to need to throw that into your notes. You're just going to know in the moment what the loot rolls should be. And so when I gave Kale this answer, he was kind of like, that seems kind of thin to me. He's just like, I don't think that's as cool as I want it to be. And so on the one hand, I really love it when people come back with that. It feels honest. It feels like we're really talking rather than just, kind of nodding while I'm, gabbing on the other end. So I appreciate that. And so he challenged me to explain my answer better. And I still stand by my answer that, prep just includes locations for loot. That's all that I really want to be thinking about. But I think what goes unspoken here is that the real work, in my mind, I forgot that there's real work involved that already got done, which is the making of those tables. The making of those tables is the real hard work of the GM. And so if you really did want to put this custom spin on your game and this custom tastiness to your loot, I think you're going to have to either just have faith in loot tables that you have in a book that you really enjoy, or make your own. So if you make your own, beware on doing D100 tables. They can be tough. You get through 20 things and you really start running out of ideas. I can tell you from experience, it gets pretty brutal. It's like walking through the desert in The Cell, and you're Jennifer Lopez with that big weird dress and that That serial killer guy is like hovering in the clouds. Remember that? Anyway, I digress. But you can do a 20 item loot table that fits your specific tone. So let's say you're doing like an Egyptian tone with pyramids and sand and lapis and beetle themes, scarab themes, stuff like that. So you can come up with 20 loot items that fit that, and then just have them roll a d20 when they find a chest, and they will get repeats, and that's okay. So imagine that there's a scarab dagger in your loot list, and there's 20 items in here, and after finding a few chests, they've found like 3 scarab daggers. Maybe it's like a +2 dagger or something, whatever. It has a cool little power. It can fold up into a bug that can fly, something like that. That's okay that there are 3 of those. They have 3 of those now. And especially when loot starts getting destroyed in some other encounter, because of course rust monsters live in the desert, and they eat scarab daggers, they're going to be happy that they have 3, and the circle of life will keep on going. So I stand by my initial statement, which is like the only thing you need to do as a GM to make loot ready to go, so to speak, in your adventure is mark where it's going to be found. Then let the players find it. And if you like to lead players to loot, like say, these skeletons lying on the ground have strangely ornate armor, and it's inlaid with lapis and the shells of scarabs, and it's really highly decorated, and it's masterfully crafted. For a shabby skeleton, this seems very unusual. Okay, that says I take a closer look and I find some loot, right? Or you can say there's a chest with a decorative latch in the corner, and it's like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I want to go open that thing. Or you can take this sort of verisimilitude, sort of quote unquote old school style, which is you don't really clue them toward loot. You just wait for players to say, ooh, I'm going to search this bad guy. And this is the more hard mode and better for advanced players, but is also a really cool style of play. So my answer really to Kale, and thanks for asking the question again, is really, if you want to do your own loot, probably the biggest piece of work is going to be in creating it and setting it up on a table. But just do that once and set it aside. Don't worry about how this all plays into your adventure. All you need for the play into portion, for that little sort of magical word hook, is location. Where can this table be accessed? And that way you're not sort of bending over backwards to try to figure out what each buried knight in each stone coffin has as his inventory. He's got this book, and he's got these rings, and he's got this sword, and then okay, now I move on to the next skeleton in the next coffin, and he has a necklace, and he has a weird helmet. And you see what I mean? Like, these lists are going to start getting quite cumbersome and take up a lot of your note space. And if that happens, it's going to be harder to play from memory, and you're going to have a slower, more clunky experience. So there it is. There's my answer, is just think in location and put your prep work, your hand wringing, your living in the basement of Minas Tirith with your red wine and your candle, looking at all these strange papers. Do that part with your work focused on a really cool loot table that matches the adventure or the characters that are about to sort of engage or unfold. So thanks for asking the question, Kale, and I hope that illuminates my answer a little better, and maybe we can meet in the middle somewhere, okay? So let's wrap up Mailbag Day by listening to that ridiculous song again.
Mailbag Day, Mailbag Day. Hey, 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 it's Mailbag Day.
All right. That'll do it on the Mailbag Day song. Oh, boy. Whew. I've created a monster. And I'm not allowed to put it down either. People are like, man, I really miss the Mailbag Day song. I'm like, oh, God. It's just like Frog Boy. It's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Okay, so we're in episode 59 here of the RPG Mainframe. Let's get down to the guts of this bad boy. What do you say? So this episode is all about beginning the beginning and ending the end. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about my notes on getting a campaign started the sort of the Runehammer way, so to speak, and doing the same to end your campaign. Now, there's a lot of advice and opinion on this topic, and a lot of it's great. So please get out there and do your homework if you're really like in a sort of a wonderful creative knot as you start to dream up this campaign and do your best to give it nuance and elegance and drama and gravity and dilemmas and resolution and power and death metal. That was death metal. Okay, beginning the beginning. I've got 5 little tidbits on things I like to sort of remind myself of while beginning a campaign. The first one is my session 0 piece, and this involves zero prep, absolute nothing prep. Basically, this is me finally knowing who my players are going to be, and it's a conversation. Usually, for me, session 0 is best not done at the gaming location, wherever you guys are going to play, whoever's house or whatever table. That is not where session 0 happens. It happens with a couple mugs of beer in a place where everyone feels comfy and you can just talk as people, not as players and DM or GM. And to me, this gets you much more into a what are you guys thinking mindset. And I think this is the right place to do it. And even calling it session 0, I think, can be off-putting for the imagination. It can make you think something specific is supposed to happen. I don't believe that's true. I think the best pre-game sessions are just conversations between friends. And it's just like, it'd be cool is if like we got a D&D game going. Yeah, that would be dope. Okay, so is everybody down? Sure. What should we do this time? And invariably, someone will say, can we just do like a more normal campaign this time? And then someone else will be like, no, I'm thinking like steampunk, only instead of steam, everything is powered by cheese. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, great. And then, the silliness ensues. And your job as the game master is not to write notes down because that makes everybody feel weird. It's to just remember that conversation and what goes down in that conversation. And for me, the most important thing to look for as a sort of a sleuth, because as that conversation is unfolding, you're sleuthing the players. On the one hand, you're looking for clues about like what they really want, what they dream of, what their ideal game would be. But on the other hand, you're also mining them for ideas that they may or may not be saying in a way that they think is going to stick. And so you're remembering, oh, we're totally doing that freaky little idea that they just mentioned, that the Kraken is actually intelligent and it's actually, like has this scheme to become human and like dominate the human world and then return to its Kraken form, and they're just joking about this. But you as the game master are over there sleuthing and mining their conversation for little tidbits that can come up later. So you get that, oh my God, you were listening response. But don't take notes because that's just plain weird. Taking notes while other people talk is just plain strange. So this is session 0. And for me, the focus there is like you're mining the players. And if you're steering them at all, like, sort of steering the conversation a little bit, the place I would steer it to is the now story. As you guys probably know by this point, if you listen to Runehammer a lot or watch me on YouTube, I am not about the backstory. The backstory is the past. It's over. Forget about it. It barely matters. One sentence or even 3 words is enough backstory. What matters is the now story. It's where are these players that we're thinking, or characters that we're thinking would be cool, together? Where are they together? Who are they? What are they doing? That's the now story. And notice those words, those verbs are present tense. And that's an important verbal cue for you. What are they doing? Not what did they do. And this is just so important to me. And so that's how you're going to steer this sort of loose so-called session 0 conversation. But I wouldn't even call it session 0. I would just call it, hey, let's get together and talk about what we're going to do for our D&D game. Okay, cool. Well, let's meet down at the pub and, beers are on me. And, what are these characters we're dreaming up and what are they doing? Where are they? That present tense is really important to me. So then as we go from session 0 into session 1, this is a little sort of almost in my mind like a montage. I call it a session unplayed. It's session 0.5. And this is where we go from the initial concept, which is where you and a group kind of get a feel for what this game is going to be. And then you are doing the thing that you just described. So if the players are like, yeah, we're a family of dwarves who's up on this icy island, and our job is to watch guard over this like old tower that seems abandoned, but we're pledged to defend it no matter what in these icy, snowy, lonely conditions. And we kind of huddle together because it's a lonely life up there. Okay, that's where we're at. Now, session 0.5 is them doing that day after day. Right? For a while. But you don't play that. And this is why I call it the session unplayed. You don't play the mundane part of what they are doing, or the sort of episodic part of the what they are doing right now, of the now story. What you play is the first moment that something terrible or wrong goes awry or happens to them. So if we run with our like lighthouser type mentality, so our players have decided they want to be these dwarves on this remote island who are standing guard over a mysterious tower for reasons they don't even understand. This goes on for days or weeks, and then, boop, what happens? And this is going to be session 1. And then mermen jump out of the frozen sea and assault the island. And they're like ravenously trying to get into the tower. And this is session 1. So you see how you don't play the kind of day in, day out, like, some feral sea lions are, to be dealt with. And like they need to sit by the fire and role play their loneliness and stuff like that. We don't need to, we can montage the now story right up to the moment that we go session 1. The mermen are leaping out. So the first moment that we gather at the table as a group, we sit down at the table and I say, hey, is okay? Everybody, feeling okay? Yeah, we're on the island as we discussed, right? It's another day guarding the tower. You guys are getting into your next guard watch shift. And who is it? Oh yeah, okay. Bardock, you're on watch right now. Everyone roll for initiative. That's it. That's starting session 1. And if I win that initiative roll as the DM, I am hurling a bunch of frozen mermen at these guys, like within 90 seconds of being ready to play in session 1, those mermen are flying in. I am a huge believer in starting a campaign this way. It lets everyone get into more nuts and boltsy play before they're forced to dig down and find emotions in themselves. And I think that this opening battle is going to be a great way not only to get back into the game and to just get the dice rolling, because as Alex says, Alex Alvarez says, when the dice are rolling, people are having fun, right? So just get those dice moving. And then as that battle is unfolding, there's going to be funny moments of people who have forgotten how to do their saving throw, people who have forgotten what damage their Warhammer does, all these little sort of funny foibles. These let everyone get comfortable in the game again, and the RP will start growing between the cracks of these stones of combat gameplay. Okay, so there's session 1, and that's what I always call the attack. It's always some kind of calamity that befalls what was semi-normal before, okay? So next we have errands. Errands is the part in the early part of a campaign where the attack, which we just talked about, session 1, it reveals the sort of foundational conflict at play. And one of the classic ones for this is that the bodies... Okay, let's keep running with our example. The mermen that attacked this remote island, they're all defeated in this opening battle. Then in session 2, they go up to inspect the bodies and they realize these aren't mermen. They're merman suits. And they take off one of the merman helmet masks and it's a drow under there. The drow are in disguise as icy mermen attacking this island. But why? And that why is going to initiate what I call the errands. And errands are like 3 to 4 sort of quests or jobs or tasks or even journeys to get answers to this sort of foundational conflict or reveal with the attack. So the attack happens, it reveals something that induces errands. And so someone in the group says, I know about the drow. They live in this cave that's right across the water over there. And they're like, we can't go over to the cave. We're supposed to stand guard here. And it's like, well, we could call on your brother. Your brother could come and stand guard for us while we go look into the drow cave. So right there we have two new errands. 1, get the brother and his dwarves, which are, maybe on a nearby island. And then 2, take the boat over to the drow cave and investigate what's going on. You see, like, you're getting these... I call them errands. Errands isn't the most exciting word, is it? But you're getting these tasks that you need to do to reveal the foundational conflict. Okay, now we're going to ratchet this sucker up and we're going to shift it into a higher gear. And this next phase, to begin the beginning, is the revealing of your villain. The successes that the PCs have on the errands, both retrieving the brother, investigating the drow cave, and more deeply, finding out that the drow actually have this huge merman fighting force because they are getting ready to not only take over these islands, but blame it all on the mermen, then reveal themselves and organize a war against the mermen. You see, they're doing that whole like Princess Bride double cross thing. You reveal all this stuff in the course of some battles and some delving and some adventures, and the success of the PCs draws the attention of the villain. That's this phase of the campaign. They're doing a good job, and the villain's like, quit meddling in my shit. right? Now, everybody has sort of had this happen in a campaign at one time or another, but you, as a masterful game master, can use knowing that this is going to happen at some point to make it dramatic. And what I mean by dramatic is something almost like Phantom of the Opera-like, right? The Phantom of the Opera kind of lurks around, right, for part of the whole thing. But then when it starts to get a little bit out of hand, he reveals himself with this whole music of the night type stuff. He comes out in force. And that's what your villain needs to do. Reveal himself just like, I am freaking too badass for you to battle right now. I'm right here. I'm running this shit. You better get out of here or you're going to get owned by my minions. Peace. And then he poof in a puff of smoke and goes straight up shredder on him. That's the revelation of the villain. And it's because of the success in the errands. Now, finally, to end the beginning and move on to the middle, which we talked about in the previous podcast, the secrets. PCs find out at this point that X is actually Y. And this is where it can be difficult for you to sort of have an idea. I know it is for me almost every time. So by the villain revealing himself, he's going to assert that this and that and the other truth are happening, right? The Drow war, their war against the mermen and how they're using the mermen as a sort of a scapegoat for the problems. And then they're going to reveal themselves and save the world from the mermen, which was actually them, blah, blah, blah. Well, the secret that's revealed to end the first sort of third or the beginning of your campaign is that, this great leader, the villain, is actually not a drow or a merman. He's some kind of immaterial, like, I don't know. He's like a hologram that's being projected by a watcher, by a sightless beholder in a cavern somewhere. And actually, he just is going to use the drow as a food source or something crazy like this. Basically, you need a big secret that only the PCs know. And this becomes a treasure to them. So it will give them more errands to do. It'll give them the middle of the game. Basically, all your secrets are out on the table. But in the game world, the secrets are still held by the players, and that's a tasty little nugget. And as that secret comes out through the middle of the campaign, that's when shit is really going to get chaotic. Okay? So you're ending your beginning with this sort of nice, tasty secret. And it doesn't have to be an earth shaker. It just has to be something that's fun to know and fun to have others not know. Okay. All right. So that, to me, is how I see beginning the beginning. You have the opening conversation, what's often known as session 0. You have the unplayed session, which is the sort of the now story, the mundane life that the characters describe in their creation phase. Then you have the attack. This is where things go awry. Then you have the errands that are sort of a result of the attack. You have the revelation of the villain, where they pops out with great bravado. And then you have the secret revealed, but kept by players. Okay, that to me is my best ideas on things I like to see in the beginning of a campaign. And they can take so many different forms, so don't let my example trap you creatively. It's just an example that I'm running with. These can take so many different forms, and that, as we often say, is one of the things that is so great about our wonderful hobby, is that it's so formless and infinite. Okay, so you have created a compelling beginning to your campaign. You guys all came together. The players are like stitched together by family bonds, by loyalty, by saving each other's lives, by sacrifice, by honesty, by truth, by nobility, by courage. And then they go through the middle. They go through all this stuff that we discussed before, and now we're getting ready for the end. So I have 4 pieces to the end. And I think it's salient to note here that there's less pieces to a good ending than there is to a good beginning. And I would argue far less sessions. I feel that once you're ready to sort of see your campaign end, it should be no more than like 3 sessions. The ending should be a slam dunk, not a grind. And I can give you a perfect example of how not to do it, which is like the Return of the King in the films. The Lord of the Rings films. That ending, what do they have, like 5 fade to blacks in that? That was so bad. It just kept going and going. I had to pee so bad at that point. And they just kept going and hugging and fading to black and then coming back up, and it's sunrise and oh my God. So don't do that. Once you know the ending is coming, like, be decisive, run down the court and slam dunk that sucker. Okay, so I have 4 pieces here. The first one is the toughest one, and that is the setback. So the players are ready to really confront the villain. They're going to rally up the power to effectively confront the villain, and then some horrible setback occurs. And this setback can be accidental. It can happen in-game by player actions, and then you can just capitalize on it. Or if this is more frequently, you can just impose it as the game master. Much how like the weather in your world is completely the department of the game master. This sort of tragedy or calamity is completely the purview of the game master, and you inflict it upon the players. They are set back right when they're they're done with the middle of the campaign. They're at the zenith of their power. They're like, we are going to do this. Some terrible setback occurs. And so for my island guards scenario that we've been talking about, we could say that as they're getting ready, the brothers that they had watch the island have turned up dead. Their bodies were found in the ocean. And a scout has reported that the tower has been destroyed on the island that they were guarding. They have completely failed their duties, and they must, well, potentially go back to investigate, but that's up to them. All I know as the game master is that this terrible calamity has occurred. Their curiosity is their business. But to me, this is a very important part of concluding the campaign. You bring it back to the beginning in some way, but you also just pound them, you knock them down so that they can rise one more time. This is why the setback is here. And this leads us to our next part. Okay, so first you have the setback, and then you have what I call the plan. The plan is something that you can induce or encourage in players, but often they will do this on their own. I know that as a player, I do it all the time, which is, okay, we need to do this thing that is in front of us, this monumental task or force of evil that we need to conquer. We need a game plan here. We can't just like charge in there. There's like 300 of these guys. They all have magic armor. We don't stand a chance. So we need some kind of plan. If only I had, what is it? An apocalypse cloak? What does he call it? The giant cloak? I don't know. So if only I had a wheelbarrow and an albino or whatever. The plan. So the characters need a plan of action of what to do, and it's often going to have some fun little parts and pieces in it of like, well, we're going to have to get, the Vorpal Sword of Supreme Shadow if we're going to do this, and so, okay, let's do that. Once we get it, we're going to go in the back. We're going to create a diversion with a fire in the forest, and we're going to sneak in. We're going to use the Vorpal Sword, and we're going to stab the beholder. Okay, there you go. That's a plan. But I think this is an important phase because it's a phase that is almost like the game master and the players saying, how do we want to sort of wrap this up, guys? What do you think? What could be an ending? Now, you could be that literal with it, or you can cloak that in, an NPC talking or some other form of inquiring to your players. But I think half of it should be what your players want to see as an ending, and half of it should be what you want to see as an ending as the game master. And when those two things come together, you're going to have a great one. And that coming together is what I call the plan. Then we have the one that everyone is probably the most familiar with, which is what I call checkmate. Checkmate is the end game. It is the boss fight. And this, I think, is a topic that is really talked about a lot. And the only thing I would have to add to it is that in the course of a boss fight, you need to get resolution as well. The boss fight conceals and reveals resolution for players. Maybe during the boss fight is explained why the tower was destroyed or why it was being protected in the first place, or why the drow became so agitated all of a sudden, or why the mermen were made to be scapegoats, or whatever. But in that final resolution, you can either do it through visual clues or through things that are found, or my favorite is boss dialogue. All cool mega villains reveal a bunch of stuff right toward the end during the final battle because they're sure they're going to win, and you're no different. You're going to do the same thing. And, a lot of these things I'm mentioning go right back to Campbell's hero's journey stuff. The hero's journey stuff just keeps popping up again and again. I don't like using it as a guide because I feel trapped by it, but dang if it doesn't just come up again and again and again. And so your big boss, your checkmate, has some nice little revelations that are hidden inside this big battle. Otherwise, it's just a big tactical slog. It's like a war game that goes on for 2 sessions because it's a boss battle. And that can still be cool, but you want emotional content in there, as Bruce Lee would say. All right, now the fourth piece to end the end, and this is the big one. This is what I call the sunset. Now, I love the ending of the old Revenge of Shinobi game where he stands on the cliff and his scarf is waving in the wind and the sun is going down. And there's a little blurb about, like what happens to the world because of your actions. And you're standing there looking out over it. Okay, that's what you're trying to do in this ending to your campaign. You've been playing for like a year. You need to do this thing justice. You want everyone to have great memories. And so I have 4 little bullets here underneath this sort of part that I just want to chuck at you. You can tell me what you think, all right? First one is the 100-year method. This is something I always do in the ending of my campaigns, is I ask players what happens to their characters in the ensuing century after this is over. And if they want to add some roles to it, they can. If they just want to narrate it, they can. But players say the darndest things when asked these questions. And you're just here, since the campaign's over, you're not here to world build at all with them anymore. You're here to just nod and celebrate them with the other players. The second one is to describe a crane shot. Now, a crane shot is a term from cinematography where you put a frickin' camera on a frickin' crane and you slowly either lift it up or lift it down, and it's used to establish a landscape, right? And what you're going to do as game master is you're going to describe this. And you can even say the word camera. You can say, as the camera lifts slowly from the ruined castle, and the frozen seas are revealed beyond, and beyond that, rolling black clouds across the ocean. There in the distance, lightning crackles, and things are as they always were. This kind of stuff. You're going to describe a literal landscape shot and call it. And this could probably be the last thing you say for the campaign. But just have the nerve to, on the spot, describe this and use the crane shot as your muse. So you're not sitting there trying to improv the ending to a novel, verbally. That is so hard to do. So instead, you're just going to describe a view of this landscape and how it may or may not have changed because of all their actions. Remember the old saying, all good stories end where they begin. And so you can do that. You can, in this case, describe this island, how we began there, and after all this stuff, we return there. And it's the same with Lord of the Rings. It all begins in the Shire and it ends in the Shire, right? And describing that gives you a feeling of, the loop is closed. The button is buttoned. We're done. Now, my final one is after that's all said and done and everybody breathes out and the tears are being wiped away and the campaign is over and you all feel like maybe we're never going to see each other again. I think I love you. My last 2 items really kind of go together, and that is getting feedback and drinking and reminiscing. Always, always, always celebrate the ending of a campaign. It is a thing to celebrate. This is a fellowship between people, and you are the game master, and so you're the one who needs to set the tone of appreciating everybody, and your job is to say, guys, that was so fun. I want y'all to meet me down at pub. Beers are on me again. I'm kind of curious what you guys thought of the campaign, and more importantly, I just want to raise a few mugs to all the crazy antics and great deeds that occurred during the campaign. We're going to just reminisce on this mofo all night long. So meet me down there, okay? And this is just like that opening conversation, only it's looking back rather than forward, and has that same celebratory tone, and you just appreciate everyone. And sometimes the event of a campaign will be remembered less than the positive emotions that go with its resolution, if you nail it like this. Okay, guys, I've been chewing your ear off about beginning the beginning and ending the ending in your campaign. And as always, I don't really think that I'm the end-all be-all of answers for this stuff. But what I'm here to do with the RPG mainframe is get your thinky gears turning. What do you agree with and disagree with that I'm saying? And how does that turn your gears as a creative game master and get you thinking about your next campaign? I am in a very lucky spot right now where I'm working on this very thing. I am getting ready to do my new table campaign here in Philly with new players that I hope to start meeting this week and see if I can, get that magic fit that you need to have a good group and get that campaign stirring. And so I'm right here facing these creative problems, and that's why this stuff is filling up my journal. Do these methods work for you? Have you tried some of these and they were hard, or they didn't work, or you have a better idea? Please throw that in the comments, because remember, here on the Runehammer Patreon, it is all about all of us helping each other get these rusty creative cogs turning. Because let's face it, creative cogs and wheels get rusty just overnight. It's like every morning you need to break them free and get them rotating and get that creative life and inspiration going again. And that's part of the purpose of the clicking golden black cube that we call the RPG mainframe. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. This is Ingrid Bernal, old hankering fur and ale from Drunkens and Dragons, right here on the Runehammer podcast, the RPG mainframe, episode 59. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Keep it real, don't steal. You always get a deal, and keep an eye out for me on ye old YouTube, because I'm going to be coming on back as soon as I get all settled here in my new spot. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you out on the internet. Strength, honor, and don't forget the beer. I'm out.